Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Joining us again to discuss Russia-U.S. relations is Richard Sakwa. He is professor of Russian and European politics at the University of Kent and an associate fellow of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, and he has published widely on Soviet Russian and post-communist affairs. His upcoming book is titled Russia Against the Rest: Pluralism and Post-Cold War Crisis of World Order. Richard, good to have you back.
My pleasure.
Richard, in this segment, let's take up the issue of how serious it is for the Russians to have withdrawn from the nuclear disarmament treaty and what all of this means.
In and of itself, Russia's withdrawal from the plutonium disposal agreement of 2000 isn't that important in and of itself. What it means is that both in that agreement, the United States and Russia committed themselves to disposing of 34 tons of weapons-grade plutonium. What they had to do was to mix it with uranium to establish a mixed oxide thing called MOX, which can then be used in nuclear power plants. Russia built its MOX plant. It's quite expensive, but it did it, and it's been disposing of stuff. The United States was building one, I think, in North Carolina. And then a couple of years ago, because of cost overruns, Obama decided not to build it, and instead of which the United States said it was going to dispose of this plutonium by diluting it and then burying it in New Mexico, which means that theoretically it could be fished out again at a later stage. It's very hard, but it could be done. I think that U.S. explanation does make sense, but given the lack of trust, Russia simply couldn't believe that a mighty superpower like the United States was not capable of building this MOX plant, therefore suspected there was something deeper going on. This comes on the back of the suspension of the other agreement, which was this attempt from the agreement on cooperation in nuclear and energy-related scientific research, which the US suspended in 2014. This was a very, very useful channel of communication between the US Department of Energy and the equivalent Russian bodies. So the whole thing is dangerous because not so much in and of itself, but when nuclear cooperation between the world's great two nuclear powers is suspended, then I think that puts everything in jeopardy. And it's symbolic that if nuclear issues are put into this pot now of mutual suspicion and recriminations, then I think it's an exceptionally dangerous situation. This was pointed out by Mikhail Gorbachev, the person who actually just was celebrating the anniversary of meeting Reagan in Reykjavik in 1986. Which was committed, both countries, in the end, ultimately, to establishing a nuclear-free world, instead of which we've got a world on the brink of nuclear, nuclear politics is back very much on the agenda. And I think it is a symptom of just how dangerous the present political situation is.
Now, turning to the domestic situation in Russia, does these tensions with the United States help or hinder President Putin in Russia?
I mean, he doesn't need it. There's a lot of arguments to say that anti-Americanism is a way of uniting the people behind him. But there's also costs to it. I think that Russian people, just like anybody, wants to get on and are not pleased to see a situation of tension. But what it does mean, it isn't just Russian politicians exploiting the tension. The tension is genuine and structural, if you like, systemic, and it comes from the failure after the end of the Cold War to establish a genuinely inclusive security system. So at home, the situation, of course, means that given international tensions, there is less scope for liberalization at home. And of course, both sides, Russia, the United States, have ramped up this sort of informational warfare, this propagandist style. And of course, the Russians, when they get involved in such a campaign, they do it with a certain gusto, just as one has to say. In this US presidential election, most candidates have done so as well.
Professor Sakwa, thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to having you back very soon as these tensions rise.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.